I'm going to be sharing two different things this morning, and they don't really go together. So the first thing that I'm going to be sharing is about something that is a core value of our church, which is generational discipleship. And I want to just kind of impart a vision. I know our Wednesday nights are starting back up September 18th. And I was talking to somebody about them, and they were like, well, tell me what's the vision for this. And what I want to share is, first of all, what we're envisioning for Wednesday nights, but I want to share something more because this is who we are as a church, is generational discipleship. And sometimes we hear that word generational, and we can think kids, okay? But generational means generations. It means that we are running after the Lord together as a family. And this isn't something that is always, it's always been a part of me where I love kids and I just see like what the Lord has over them. But the truth is I see it over all of you. Like I think sometimes we can caught up of what's in one group. And I feel like the Lord just has a calling over every person in this church that who you are and what you have is of value. And I was thinking about this. I'm going to share two different thoughts. One is in the Bible, the Lord says he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He says it over and over and over. And in fact, he even talks to Jacob and refers to Abraham as his father. And I was thinking about this. First of all, what can you remember in the Bible that Isaac is known for as far as his relationship with the Lord? I can't hear you very loud, so if you're thinking, like he obeyed his father, right? He obeyed him to go and to a different land to find Rebecca, his wife. But other than that, there's not a whole ton of Isaac and what his relationship with the Lord looked like, except for that we know he blessed his sons. Right? He has a blessing over them. And there's other things in there, but just as a whole, you think of Abraham and you can think of all these things, like how he had to walk out by faith, how he had all these things that he did with the Lord that are written for us. And he has a son, Isaac, but Isaac is listed in this thing of generations because the truth is he had a father. And there's something simply about having a father that an inheritance is passed down to the next generation, and they have a legacy to walk out of that inheritance, and they're named in among it. And you think about Isaac, and then you think about Jacob, and you think about what did Jacob do? And there's some things, but I feel like one of the most important things that Jacob did is he had 12 sons. And he blessed his sons. And that thing that was in Abraham is passed on down because Abraham didn't actually get to walk out many of the promises that God spoke over his life. He called him and said, you will be the father of many nations. And the truth is he had 2 kids. He had 2 sons. He didn't get to see that the Israelites possessed the land that he called them to this place. He walked it out by faith. He did this thing, but he actually didn't see the Israelites possessing this land in his lifetime. But it was something that he had to hold on to that and believe for it, not just for himself, but for what was coming. And I think that's not really common in our lives, right? We often think about our own lives and what we have and live your best life now. Like, we talked about this yesterday. What's your bucket list? You think about like, what do I want to accomplish in my lifetime and for myself to get to experience? And that's really good. But I think that there's a thing too of what am I building and what am I building up as an inheritance, so I am giving it for the next generation to walk in, because I might not even see all the things that I feel like the Lord has spoken, that he's called to, that it might be my kids that walk in it. And I want to prepare them to be able to be carriers of the promise that the Lord may have given to me. So this is our heart for our church and generational discipleship, is not just that we're going to be a place that has great kids programs, which we do want to be, but that it's a thing that when we gather in this place with each other, that we see what God has in each other and we call that out, whether you're 70 or 7, that I can look at you and say, I know what I see God has in you. And I want to pull that out because I want to experience the inheritance of what God has spoken in your life in this place. So, okay, so that is part of our heart for this. And that's like, again, from the youngest to the oldest, whether you're involved with the kids or not, you are, right? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, so I want to share what we're doing on Wednesday nights because it's going to be a little bit different. We are going to have our Wednesday nights for our kids, but there has been this thing of like the Lord calling us to be a house of prayer where we are teaching our kids to pray generationally. And we've heard it enough times that we're like, this is something the Lord has for us, and it seems like a now thing. So we're going to change that. We're going to have some time where we are praying and worshiping together. And it's going to be the kids getting to do their songs, which if you haven't been here on a Wednesday night, you will be blessed to watch how they worship. And I think about this too, of like what we have to gain from them. Because I want to tell you, I don't worship as uninhabited. I don't even can't say the word. Uninhibited. I was going to say uninhabited. I'm like, that's not it. I don't worship as uninhibited as they do, right? Like, I have something to learn and grow in from them. And that's generational discipleship too, is us learning those things of like wonder and joy and freedom that they possess. And we want to do that together. And we want to pray with them and teach them how to pray so that I just think like, if they don't hear John Biermeyer walking around this room praying, like if you haven't been in here when he's interceding, there's something of an inheritance you haven't gotten to experience yet. That's like I hear it and I just think, I want my kids to hear that. I want them to grow in prayer. And from so many of you, because it looks different in each one of us. And one of them might catch on to something of who you are in him, that they're meant to live out who they are in him. So I was thinking about this too. This was a story, and I'm trying to figure out how it ties in, but it seemed really important when I was preparing and praying. So we just went on a trip with our kids out west, and we've never done a big trip before, and we've never traveled really far before, but it went really well for the most part. And in planning, one of the places we went to was Yellowstone. And everybody talks about, like, you got to give more times to Yellowstone than the Grand Tetons because this is so amazing. You got to make sure you get up early to go see these animals. And all I can think of is these people obviously aren't from Wisconsin that are saying this because if I want to see deer, I just got to drive at like 5 p.m. On the back roads, and I'm going to see these deer anyway. Like, we don't need to spend that much time in Yellowstone. We don't need to see these animals. Like, there's animals everywhere here. And then the thing is I'm not planning this trip just for myself. If it was a Bethany trip, I would have spent time in the mountains and done these big hikes. But I was thinking of it as family. What are we going to do as family to grow together, to love each other and experience joy together? And that's not going to be a 12-mile hike. I'm just going to tell you, not much joy there with my kids. So at least not all of them. So one of those things where you think about it differently. And it's like, you know what, like, I think they'll really love getting to see animals, even though we see them here. And can I tell you what one of the best parts of our trip was animals. Like, for myself, because we're sitting in this car, and we saw, like, the first day an elk. And you're like, it's really a big deer. Like, I know anybody who's a hunter is like, no, it's not. It's different. But in my mind, it's like a big deer with different little horns. So anyway, but at the same time, you're like, oh my goodness, we found one. Everybody, you pull over and you're all just standing there for 20 minutes staring at an animal that's so similar to what you have back home. But there's something about the joy that your kids are experiencing in this moment of like, wow, that all of a sudden creates me to go, oh, this is cool. When it's like maybe it wasn't as cool as I thought it was. And it did get cooler as we go because we got to see moose. And we got this bison that brushed against our car while we were walking. And all of a sudden you're like, best parts of the trip were these. And you're like, it's not what I thought it would be. And I just want to encourage you that with like discipleship and with Wednesday nights is that I think that there's a joy and a wonder that the Lord wants us as adults to recapture that they have to give us. Even if you think that might not be my favorite thing to do. So, and it might not be. That's okay because, like, again, this is family and we're thinking about this in this case, not as a kids program, but of what does it look like for us to be family together and also to equip them because they're walking in something different than we haven't. And like we're going to be intentional this year, like of going after identity. I know we're doing that on Sundays, and it's kind of cool that it's doing that with the adults, and we're kind of like preparing the way with this, but it's all about identity for our kids this year, because that is what the enemy is coming against them. And it's funny in this thing where we're reassigning the definition of everything. The first book that they're doing, its name is Defined. And they're being defined according to who God says they are in his word and what he's called them to, that he's created, that they're sinners saved by grace, that they are a new creation. So we want to spend time doing that. And in the past, we have had amazing people who have served, and they have served all year long as a small team of people and just poured themselves out for our kids. But we want to envision something a little different, of us being a family together in this place, and for as many people to be able to give a portion that can. And so we're doing things a little differently. And what we're going to do is very similar for the kids. They're going to have their lesson, worship, prayer verses. But instead of just playing games and doing a craft, we're trying to do this by skills. And so if you feel like, you know what, I think I could kind of like be part of teaching them through one of these books, like the books there, we're just walking it out and talking together, that's going to be called lesson. I'm willing to help with a lesson, and we're grouping it in 2 8-week sessions, and then a 4-week one for Lent, so that you don't have to help all year. But if you're willing to help for a portion, if you're willing to help for lesson, that's kind of an 8-week, or that Lent is a 4-week. But I feel like I look around this room and I think about like what my kids have learned from each of you. And Jim Rupel's not here. If he is, he's downstairs. But like my kids went fishing with Jim. And while they were fishing, he told them this testimony. And all of a sudden, it's like, they remember this testimony. It's a cool testimony. And all I can think of is like, that's it. That's what we're after. We're after walking out life together and being handed down the testimony of what the Lord has done in their time, so that it becomes their testimony as well. And so we're trying to do this instead of just doing games and crafts, especially with our 2nd and 5th graders. We're splitting them into boys and girls, and we want adults who are willing to come in and teach them a skill in relationship with them for this second portion of the night, which is about 25 minutes or so. And we're kind of grouping it. So the first skills that we are going after are cooking and outdoor skills. So if you feel like, you know what, like, this is broad. We're not saying you have to be able to speak this, but if you have something, if you're like, I could teach them how to start a fire. I could teach them how to, bake a cake or something. And you feel like, you know what, I think I could teach the boys this. Like, we're just trying to make it as doable as possible for people to come in. And if you can do 1 week where you're like, I have something that I could share with them. And as I'm sharing with them, I'm also going to share who I am in the Lord. I'm going to share that testimony. And my hope is Jim will come in and teach these kids a little bit of fishing and share that testimony one of these nights. But I want to give that vision for everybody in this church, that you have something that you could impart and give, even if it's a 1 week, and you can do it in a way that feels comfortable. And like, oh, I could share about this that I know how to do with these kids, because it's also things that they may need for who they're becoming. So, okay, and just on that, I feel like it's time for the church to recapture the things that we've given away to the world of raising up our kids. Because you think of how many kids are at the Boys and Girls Club every week that they are imparting to and growing, and it's amazing that they do that, but it's almost like, where's the, like this should be us. Like, where are all the kids coming here after school, being imparted with the truth of the Lord and grown in their identity of who they are in Christ? And we've given so much away. So we're just taking back one step at a time for our kids, the kids that are willing to come in this place, and it's open to any kids that want to come, that we're going to raise them up as to become men and women of the Lord, but be also just in relationship of this is what it means to have a skill as you grow up. So, okay, there are sign-ups in the back, but I know you might want to think about this, because if I think off the top of my head, I can't actually come up with one, if you told me a category, but think on it, pray on it. And if you have something, you can either just sign up and say, I'm willing to do this, or talk to me. So sign-ups are also for your kids, are out there today. Okay, that's part 1. Part 2 is something that I felt like the Lord shared with me to share with the church. And so we're going to go to Mark. And we're going to go to Mark chapter 11. So if you want to turn there, we're going to kind of we'll bounce around, but we're going to be out of Mark 11. So while we were on our trip, all of a sudden, like, there's this space, and I was just praying about, like, what to dig into in the Word. And I felt like this thing of, like, to concentrate on the week before Jesus died. Because if you knew you had 1 week to live, it'd be purposeful, right? And Jesus is always purposeful. He always did what the Father was doing, but you just think, like, if I knew I had 1 week, this would be the most important things I have to impart to my kids, to my family, to my friends coming out. Like, there's no time for anything else but the most important thing. And so I just spent time reading through the Gospels in that last week of Jesus. And what kept coming back to me was this story of Jesus cleansing the temple. And it's not like a common one. In fact, my husband Kevin was like, so what are you sharing on tomorrow? Like, what? And I was like, Jesus cleanses the temple. And he's like, were you assigned to that? And, like, it just doesn't seem like, of everything you could pick to share on, this is the one. But this is what, like, the Lord kept, like, it's like I couldn't, like, that nagging feeling where you're just like, this is the story that kept, like, there's something to it. There's something here. And I've heard this story so many times since I was a kid. I grew up in the church. So we're going to read the story, and then I'm going to tell you where the Lord started taking me with it, and hopefully it all connects together. Okay, we're actually going to start in verse 12. This is Jesus cursing the fig tree. It says, on the following day, so the day before Jesus entered Jerusalem, this is the day where they, like, wave palm branches. If you were ever a kid and you wave palm branches, and he's coming in, and they're seeing him coming into Jerusalem as their king. And that's what they're envisioning in this moment. This is the next day. So at the end of the day, he entered Jerusalem. He went into the temple. He looked around at everything. And then because it was late, he went back to Bethany, which is a nearby city, to spend the night. Okay, verse 12. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. Verse 15, and they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of all the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you've made it a den of robbers. And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. Okay, we're going to stop there for right now. I know some of you maybe will know all these facts, but there may be some who don't know them. So I'm going to share some different things. The reason that they have money changers in the table is because in the temple, they had to use a specific type of coin, but it was actually not the coin that most people had in Jerusalem. So the fact of having money changers, they needed to exchange their money because part of the way they worshiped is they had a sacrifice that they were supposed to bring to the Lord. And these are things in Leviticus that the Lord has said, like, this is the sacrifice for this is the sacrifice for this. And so that is why there are money changers and there's people who are selling animals, because this was part of the way that they worshiped back then. The place that they were doing this is called the court of the Gentiles. And how the temple worked is there was different courts and different people were allowed in different courts. So this is like the outermost kind of area. And this is the place where anyone is allowed to worship. Like if you were a Gentile, if you were a woman, like it didn't matter. You could be learned or non-learned. This is the place for everybody to come to worship together. Beyond that, the Gentiles weren't allowed. Gentiles were anybody who was not a Jew. So this is the place that they had to come to worship the Lord and to pray and to have communion with him. And this is what's going on in this area. The reason that they're selling animals is because a lot of people would come from a long way away, and it was pretty inconvenient to have to bring your animal, and they might not accept it. It might not be perfect by the time you get there. Something might happen. So it's like a way to make it possible for people to worship more easily. They sold these animals right in the temple so that you could come, you could pay your money, and then have your animal for your worship. Okay, so that's the little bit of backstory of why this is happening, just in case it just seems weird, because it seemed weird, wouldn't it, if we had animals in our church for you and you'd be like, oh, that doesn't happen today. Okay. And there's different thoughts of this, of why he calls it a den of robbers, that they were overcharging possibly for this, and that there's different stories where in the Bible where it talks about them robbing widows and the poor. So this thing of possibly that it was making it difficult for people to worship because of the way that they were selling these animals as well. Okay, so this is, as I'm reading this story and I'm reading it, I feel like all of a sudden the Lord asked this question. And the question that I felt like he asked me was, why now? Why now does Jesus choose to cleanse the temple in this way? And there's a story in John where people believe he actually cleansed the temple twice, possibly because it happens in a different timeline. But he's gone to the temple about 4 times a year, most likely, if he was a good Jew, since the time he was born. They came to the temple regularly in Jerusalem. Even if you lived from a far-off place, you traveled to Jerusalem and you worshiped. So he's grown up seeing this. He's seen it several times during his ministry as an adult. And I feel like the Lord just asked, like, why now? He's about getting ready to die. And once he dies, we know on this side that the temple is no longer the place of his presence. The place of his presence is now with man, that he sends the Holy Spirit. And in fact, the temple, he even preaches about it and shares, like, it's going to be demolished. Like, it's going to be gone. But he also shares that, like, he's going to send a spirit, and his spirit's going to dwell in us. And this is found in 1 Corinthians 3. And it says, do you not know you are God's temple, and God's spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is holy. You are that temple. So this is like a biblical truth that, like, this is coming. Like, Jesus knows this. This is a less than a week, then he's going to die, and that curtain in the temple is going to be separated so that his presence can live with man. It's in a symbolic thing of he's no longer hidden behind the Holy of Holies for only a few people to enter once in a while. He's now dwelling with man. And this has always been God's heart, right? God created man to walk in the garden with them, to be with them. And that's like what was robbed, what was lost when man sinned. And it says in Revelation that this is the new heaven and the new earth. It's like the main thing that defines it is that it starts in verse 3. It says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. So this is like the defining thing of like the new Jerusalem and the new heaven, is that God is no longer like we can see him face to face. He's with us. But in the meantime, he sent his spirit to dwell in us so that we can be that temple. And it says Jesus himself is the new temple. We are in him, it says. So the same way that he lives in us. So why now? Why is he cleansing this practice that has been going on for who knows how long in this temple now, when he's also sharing that his spirit's going to come and dwell and we will become the temple? And this is the question that I feel like the Lord just put on me, that I was like, this is the place to dig, so just stay there. And this is kind of for myself and my relationship with the Lord. It's like he gives me a question that I can't seem to, like, it's like you couldn't drop it if you wanted to. It's the thing that starts taking over, and you're like, I have to know what's on his heart in this. Okay, so I'm going to try to share what I feel like the Lord was showing me with it. And I think, first of all, is like the idea, like in reading this, how unbelievable is it that the God who created the heavens, the earth, where he says, like, what are you going to create for me to dwell in? Like, heaven's my throne, earth's my footstool. I can't say words today. Like, he says how great he is, and yet he chooses to live in us. And I think it's so easy to take it for granted, like, because it's common, right? If you've grown up in the church, it's common. Jesus lives in my heart. And it's not a cute thing. It should be something that drops us every time, that God himself has humbled himself so greatly to choose to live inside of me, to have his spirit, the same spirit that searches the mind of God himself, searches and can speak to me. And the same spirit that rose Christ from the dead, that thing that's so powerful, that the thing that was impossible, that held like everything under like lock and key, like you couldn't get past this, you can't get past death. And it's like that same spirit that could lives inside of us. And it's so easy, like it's uncomprehendable, right? It's kind of like that thought of eternity, of like things will, like it never ends. And like, I don't know if you've ever done this where you try to think about it and then your brain just gets stuck, right? Because you can't. It's something that's ungraspable to our human mind, but it's written there, right? There's something that's written there. And it's the same thing with Jesus, like the Spirit of God himself dwelling in us, that it's kind of like you can try to think about it, but it's ungraspable. But it's written in our hearts that it's true. And I think like this is like, there's also in the same verse, but it's in Luke, when they're talking about it, his disciples are remembering, and they say, they remember that it was written, and it's written in Psalm 69, verse 9, it's zeal for your house consumes me. So they're watching Jesus doing these things, and they're trying to figure it out too, like what's, like, this doesn't seem like the first thing you do as like new king is upset everybody who is in power by clearing out the temple and making a mess of things. But he did, because there's a zeal. And I think of like that thing, like zeal is like jealousy. And I did not go to Bible school. And so like when I tell you what this word means, I want to give you a tool because somebody gave that tool to me. And I just actually overheard the tool. It was one time we were at something and Alicia asked Lynn, how do you know all this? Like, how do you know what that word means? Because I want to know this. And there's an app called the Blue Ribbon Bible, right? Blue Letter Bible. And BLB, it's like a little blue Bible, you can download and you can look up any verse and it'll tell you what that word means. So when a word like zeal comes up and you're like, you know, like what do they really mean by zeal here? You can just tap on it and like it will tell you. So there's your tool. Now you've overheard it as well. Zeal means a jealousy, like a husband for a wife. That it doesn't want to share that person, that, you know, like that is my jealous desire. So zeal, that's what it means, is that picture of that it's like, that's not, like, it's not going away. This is my possession. It's my passion. It's the thing I'm after. He's zealous for it to the point that it consumes him. And then I started thinking about like what it means to consume something. And like the closest I can get is like, have you ever, for me, it's losing my keys. I lose my keys. I also lose my debit card quite often. My family can tell you that's true. Abigail Lester, who's downstairs with her kids, can also tell you that's true because she works at the bank where I have to go get a new one. But when I lose something of importance, it consumes me. And I know I should just let it go. Like, it will turn up. It always does. I will find the keys. There's only so many places it can be, but I can't let it go. It's like I'm out there with a flashlight in my car, in the dark, looking under seats, lifting up mats, like retracing my steps, calling all the stores that I've been to that day. Like, it's like I know I should make dinner, but I can't. This is taken over. Then I go in the house and I come back, and even though I've checked under those mats with a flashlight, do you know what I do? I do it again because there is a chance I missed it. That's consumed in my mind. Like, that's like what I think about. Like, it's the closest to something that like consumes me is that point. And I think to the point of like, of all the things that like could consume the mind of God, it's us. It's this jealous desire to be with us. And it kind of just leaves me stunned because I think, why me? I'm not that fond of a girl. Like, I'm not, like, what do I have to give you? And I don't have anything to give him. That's the truth. I have nothing but myself to give him. But it's what he wants. He just wants to be with us for some reason because he made us and he loves us. He's consumed with us being with him. And, it says a house of prayer, that his house would be a house of prayer. But we just read about that. It's not really about this building anymore. This building is a tool, but it's no longer the thing that's the carrier of his presence. That's you. And he's consumed with the thought to be with you in a place of prayer. And sometimes I think of prayer and I think, I'm not really great at praying. I want to be amazing at praying, but I think of prayer so many times and I think of a list. And this is my list of all the things that I'm going to pray for, because that's how I was taught how to pray, was you make a list and then you pray about each of those things. And I just think it's such a small definition of prayer. It's a part of it, right? But there's these verses that talk about sacrifices were a part of their worship, was part of what they're supposed to do in the temple. And if you read Jeremiah 7 or Ezekiel, they're talking about these, I might just pull one of them up here. Yep, let's pull up Isaiah 66. I was going to use it later. We're going to use it now. Okay, Isaiah 66, and we're going to start in verse 1. Okay, thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What is the house you would build for me? What is the place of my rest? All these things my hand has made, and so all these things came to be, declares the Lord. But this is the one to whom I will look. He was humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Okay, this is another one of those that I looked up. This word is not actually referring to the Bible itself. It is referring to the spoken word of the Lord, which encompasses all the ways he speaks. Okay, the person who trembles, who stops and has fear of it, a healthy fear. I'm going to keep reading a second, but I'm going to tell you, this is my tremble moment. This is the first time I think I've actually trembled. On our trip, I overheated our brakes because I didn't know what I was doing driving down the side of a mountain and got stuck on the side of the mountain by chance because someone was trying to pass me. So I pulled over and I smelled burning brakes. I now know what it is to drive in low gear, but just going to say you don't drive in low gear much around Wisconsin, and I haven't been that many places. So I'm standing outside this car and our brakes are literally smoking. You can smell the burning. I'm looking it up, what do you do? And all it says is you cannot drive your vehicle, your brakes will fail. And going down this mountain, it's all switchbacks. It's there's all these places for trucks where all their brakes can fail and they can drive off. So you're driving down this thing thinking they're not just making this up. This actually happens, that brakes fail, because these things you can see they're used, which is also terrifying. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and this is also not a road you can bring trailers down. I also learned on this trip, you should look up what roads you're going to drive and not just pick one, but you should be purposeful in knowing what kind of a road it is. Anyway, but I didn't know these things. First time down a mountain, learning it. So I'm thinking, they can't even come and bring a tow truck here to the side of the mountain because they are not allowed those type of, they can't trailer our vehicle off. And we have to get down this mountain. It's day 2. We're stuck here. And I was trembling. And I don't know that I remember another time in my life where I felt like this. I was fear beyond fear for what seemed like a healthy reason, because I did not want to kill my entire family on day 2 of vacation. But it's this thing of I am not moving forward because I am trembling at this situation. And until there's an understanding and there's a peace, we're not going on. We made it down the mountain. So obviously we're here, but it was and we didn't die. But it was one of those things where I'm texting out for prayer, talking to Kevin, we're thinking it through, we're practicing driving on the little thing that we're on the side of the mountain that we just pulled over on. It's you proceed with caution because there's a healthy fear of the situation. And it says, this is the one who I will look. He was humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. And I think of that, of how carelessly I go about this word, about his words that he's spoken to us, about the thing. Do I hold it in that same regard where I think, I'm waiting on you, Lord. What do you have? I want to do this right, or I may die. And I just think to tremble his word. Okay. He who slaughters an ox, again, part of their sacrifice system that he put in place, is like one who kills a man. He who sacrifices a lamb, part of the sacrifice system that he put in place, like one who breaks a dog's neck. He who presents a grain offering, part of their sacrifice system of worship, is like one who offers pig's blood. That was detestable. He who makes a memorial offering of fragrances, like one who blesses an idol. They have chosen their own ways. Their soul delights in their abominations. I will choose harsh treatment for them and will bring fears upon them, because when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they did not listen, but they did what was evil in my eyes and chose that in which I did not delight. And I just think like all those things are like hinging on the fact that he spoke and he called to them and they weren't listening. And I think of like, what does it mean to be a place of prayer? And prayer isn't just us like coming with a list and sitting before him. It's a piece. But there's a part of just sitting and listening to his voice. Be a people who will wait upon him and hear and obey and walk those out. And I think that's like part of this thing of being a house of prayer isn't just what we think of as prayer oftentimes, of like requests to the Lord or praying for situations, but it's communion. Like it's being with him. Like you think of Jesus, he'd go off for hours away from the disciples to pray, and then the disciples ask him, teach us how to pray. And this prayer is short. But his time with the Father wasn't. You know, sometimes it's not always about the words we say, but it's just about being with him. Remember, his desire is to dwell with man. And dwell doesn't mean like visit. It means like a place to stay. Okay. So I'm thinking about all these things, thinking about the temple, and he keeps asking this question, but why now? And I think about the story of the fig tree, because it's kind of a weird story, because then you come back after this, and the fig tree is dead, and the disciples are like, whoa, he cursed this fig tree, and it like shriveled up, and it's nothing. Like, that's something. And I think like, I always thought like, well, obviously it doesn't have figs. It's not in season. Like, again, it's one of those, but why? You know, like you read things and you just got to think like, what are you after, God? Because I'm not seeing it in this moment, because it doesn't just make sense to my heart, but there's something that you're like tugging on to get out. And I think about like him cleansing this temple, and I feel like obviously there's things going on. Like I think about what he probably saw that like made him angry. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys, like, what do you think, like, he saw? Like, what were the sins in this moment? You guys can just shout them out, but you're going to have to shout them, like, a little bit louder than what was happening earlier. So, what do you think Jesus saw that made him mad as he saw these people with these tables in the temple selling things? Yeah, that's a great definition of greed, right? Selfishness and greed. Irreverence. They do not recognize what the Lord has in this place, so they have no fear of the Lord and what this place is meant for. They're being flippant about his house and what it's called to. Familiarity. Yep, we just do this because you've just always done it, right? This is what we do here, and you stop, you know. Okay, anything else? I thought about injustice. I think that's a big one in our day and age, right? You see these people who are just trying to worship the Lord coming, and they're kind of being robbed, but they have no choice because they have to bring this offering because they desire to worship the Lord. Anything else that comes to mind? Disrespect, yeah. Not honor, having honor. Okay, so I'm asking this question of the Lord, why now? And I feel like this is the question like that the Lord all of a sudden like started posing to me of giving this question, because I just wasn't getting it. And all of a sudden it's like, if I am the temple, what are the tables set up in my own heart that are distracting from it being the place it was called to be? And I think like some of those are distractions, right? It's like you think about those people who are truly coming with a pure heart to come to worship, and this whole scene's going on. I mean, you don't have pigeons and lambs and money changers, without a lot of noise, without a lot of smell. So part of it is just like some things are just distractions, and they're not where they're meant to be. It wasn't that this whole thing was bad per se, like they needed animals for the sacrifice, but it's not where it was meant to be. It was convenient that it was there, right? It's a lot easier than probably having to get a permit to set up on the street, but it's not where it's meant to be. And I think of like the same motives behind the things that are at the tables, the greed, the stealing, injustice, and irreverence. And I think those can be like the same motivations in my own heart underneath the things that are tables set up in my own life, right? I can be going after something that's not really mine to have, that I'm not content with him as provider and what he's given to me. So I'm running and running after something, but I'm not being who I was meant to be first. Or I can think like I just am flippant about it. Like, okay, yes, like his presence dwells in me. How great. He loves me. And I'm not holding it with reverence that he has a voice that's speaking to me, that he sent his son to die so that we could dwell with each other once again. And it becomes the last thing on my list in the day. Or it's something I become content with not even doing. There's a verse in Isaiah 43, where it talks about like they stopped listening to the voice of the Lord and they grew tired of the Lord. And I think like that's so true, right? It can become this thing where like we stop, and it's like, it's part of it's just kind of crazy. Okay, so how many of you like have read through the Old Testament and you just think like, or like even the New Testament where they're saying Jesus and you're like, how did they not see? Or like you think of the Israelites and they're like, why would you worship the idols? They're statues. Like, why would you do it? Like, you have the living God as a pillar of fire and a cloud, and you still have your idols? Like, it's kind of, like you think like, oh, it was so easy, guys. All you had to do was not do the idols and not go and, like break the few rules he set up for you. Like, it was so simple. Like, why couldn't you do it? And I look at my own heart and I'm like, I don't need a cloud or a fire. Like, I have his actual presence living inside of me, willing to manifest himself as peace and joy in my life. And I can get so distracted by other things that are like statues. They're little things, but they're right there and they're easy to grasp. I think like a big one for mine is like this idea of just like, I just need a break. I just need to relax and and I'll put on my phone and try to find something to laugh at. And I think, but I could have rest. Like, he offers himself to us. Like, he's the one who prepares a table for us. He's the shepherd that leads us to the table. He lays himself as the bread on the table. He pours out his blood for us to be cleansed, to be with him. He's done it all. And all we need to do is sit at the table. And what we could have is the living water where we never thirst again. Right? We could have the bread of life that sustains us. Right? He's like the breath of life. It's that thing where you just feel like, I just can't catch my breath today. How many of you have ever said that? I have 5 kids. I say it a lot. Like, I just feel like I can't catch my breath. And he is the breath of life. But I'll go to my phone, which offers no breath of life. And I don't know why, But it's a table that's set up in my heart. That's an easy, convenient thing to go to. That's robbing me from communion with Jesus. And I think the point of this isn't guilt. Like, oh, you didn't do that. Because like in Isaiah 43, if you have time, read it. Like, it's just like everything he's done. He's like, like, I've wiped away your sins. I remember them no more. I have given you this. This is the promises I have for you. These are all the good things I have for you. Like, it's all filled with this love. And in the middle is this verse, like, but you've grown tired of me because you won't listen to my voice. And somehow not listening to his voice gives us exhaustion. And I don't know how many of you have ever felt exhausted. I was going to say, I felt exhausted. And you know the remedy for exhaustion is his voice. Right? It's the breath of life. It's his, like that living power that energizes us, that we're supposed to struggle with the energy going through our veins because of his presence living in us. And instead I'm like, I'm exhausted. I guess I'll scroll on my phone. Or I'm bored. I'll entertain myself and run after this thing because, it seems like maybe it will fill the void. And I find myself and look at me and say, man, I'm an Israelite. Like, man, I am so tempted to run after the things I see to the right and the left instead of the presence of God that comes to like bring life, bring peace, bring joy, bring all the things, like bring us on the adventure of walking out obedience with him and the testimony that follows of like, did you see what the Lord did when I walked in obedience to him? And we're energized by it. And then I know for myself, I can be like, that was amazing, doing that every day. And the next day I'm like, I'm walking to the right, walking to the side again by these tables of convenience in my life. Okay, so why now? And I think part of the why now is because it's a prophetic message to his bride to prepare themselves to be the temple, because they hadn't been the temple up to this point. And he's showing them to clear it out. And I even think the fig tree is like a prophetic sign of like, it doesn't matter the season. You bear fruit in every season. This isn't for a season. The Lord is hungry. What's the desire that consumes him? To dwell with us. He hungers to be with you. In and out of season. It might seem like not my season to be with him. This is hard, or I've got a lot going on. I've said that too, where I'm just like, I just can't, like right now, like I'm just not connecting with the Lord like all the excuses we make for it, but it doesn't matter. He wants it in every season of our life. And I know I know those who have young kids, like this can be so hard because I had 5, I still have 5, but they were all like boom, boom, boom. And it's like, there's a verse that I took a lot of comfort in, that it says he gently leads those with young, but he's still leading you. He's still leading you to the table in every season. And he knows how to make a meal for you in the 5 minutes that you have as a young mom. When your baby's going to cry in 2 minutes and all the things are happening. Like, don't give up hope that he is a good Savior who is capable of leading you to that table still. In every season, no matter what's going on, he's a good Savior who leads his flock because he's the shepherd and he's the gatekeeper. And, he's all the things. He's got it all under control if we follow him. So why now? And I think the other why now is because the hour was late. Okay. And I think right now the hour is late, right? He knew he only had this tiny bit of time left. This is important. And I think we need to recognize the signs of the times that the hour is late. I was thinking this week of the parable of the 10 virgins. And in this story, they're waiting for the bridegroom, and it's their job to welcome him in this bridal party. And they have lamps because they don't know what time he's coming. And it's their job to have these lamps lit so that they can see and welcome him in. And 5 of them bring oil with them. And we talk about oil as like the intimacy with Jesus, like being with him, having this history, knowing him. But the thing is that their oil ran out. And I was thinking about this story, and I'm like, they didn't know the hour, but they should have, right? Like, it's getting dark. They should have been like, sun's starting to kind of look like it's going to go down. My oil's running low. But they didn't. Because why? Because they're distracted, right? Maybe there's a lot going on at the party, and they just weren't watching that oil level, Or maybe they weren't paying attention to what hour it was. But they chose to be irreverent about it, right? They chose to not hold in value their job to have that lamp lit. And I think we need to know the hour. You can look around, the signs of the times are there for the hour that we live in. Besides the fact that like he is the bread of life, but you know what? Manna was for one day. And we need him as our daily bread, right? The thing. And we need him as the oil that keeps our lamps lit because there's burning going on. So that oil needs to be there. And I think we need to recognize the hour that we live in and make sure, are we making the main thing the main thing? Like, are we doing the thing that's after his heart? Are we hearing his voice? Are we taking time to listen to his voice? I just think, like, if there's one thing that's on the list for the day, every day, it's this: be with him. Not just read your Bible, right? That's a check mark item. Not just pray off the list. You can do those things and not be with him. Okay? This isn't check the list time to make sure I did the things I was supposed to do to be a good Christian, because so were the sacrifices that he just said in Isaiah. That's like, to me. Like, he's like, I don't like it. Like, hear my voice. Be with me. I think about like the consuming. Like, I want what consumes him to consume me. And I think about like how many times I will go to my car in the dark with a flashlight and lift up the same mat over and over and over. But do I do it with Jesus? Do I do it with his presence? Or do I sit there for 5 minutes and be like, man, I'm distracted today. I'm just not feeling anything. Well, I guess I didn't experience his presence today. I guess I didn't hear his voice today. I'll try again tomorrow. No, I want it to consume me. I want to be consumed, that this house is a house of prayer, because that's the desire of his heart, is what consumes his. And so I want to be consumed. And so I want to encourage us, like, get out the flashlight. Lift up the mat over and over. Get in the word. Sit there 5 more minutes. Be like, I'm not going until I'm with you. I want to experience your presence. Like, and I think about like all the benefits of it, all the things that he's promised to meet us as, if we'll value and clear away some of the tables in our life to make space to let the house be what the house was supposed to be. Okay? Doesn't mean those things are bad. They're just maybe out of place. Okay? What's happening in the court of the actual temple? This is just a verse. This is some of the promises. I think a lot of us like Psalm 91. It's like about how the Lord in the day of evil, he protects us from all the things that are coming against us. But this is how it starts. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. And you can't abide unless you first dwell in the shelter of the Almighty. And we're meant to go out and be carriers of his presence, this abiding presence that goes with us everywhere. But there's a thing here first, if he who dwells will abide. Okay? In the shelter of the Most High, and one thing it's called, he who dwells in the resting place of God, is one version how they put it. And I just think, like, go find that place. It might not be a quick visit. It might be a thing that you have to sit there for a while. And don't just go there. This is home, okay? This is the dwelling place. This is the house of prayer that I am, okay? So this isn't like my Bethany and this piece of my life, and I go to this place with the Lord. This is me. I am the house of prayer. This is you. You are the house of prayer. This is the address, is the dwelling place of the Most High God. And we're called to take that and that abiding presence that's supposed to be living in us to the world around us. Okay. And there's just one more verse. I'm going to go back to Mark 11. And I think this is like the thing. Sorry, I'm turning and talking at the same time, so what I'm saying is not going anywhere. It's like, what do you do with this? You know, I'm a person who's always like, well, what do I do with that now? Like, I need a step to take, because I don't want to just, like Dave was talking about, I'm like right on. Like, I don't want to be a fat Christian who's filled with all these good truths and has no idea what to do with them and how to walk them out and let them out and have my life changed because I want to be changed. And I believe that's the desire of your hearts, right? I look at this place and I think it's a people who want to walk in the ways of the Lord, whose desire is after him. And so I think like part of it is like recognizing what are the tables, okay? And so I just want to like encourage you as you're going through your day and you find yourself feeling something like, man, I feel tired right now. And what am I going to? Or man, I'm bored right now. What am I going to? Or what am I not content with? And what am I going to? And those are tables, okay? Because if he's not the source, then those things are tables. And again, it doesn't mean that they're always bad things, but they're maybe out of place if it's what's happening in those moments. And there's this verse in Mark 11, and this is one that stood out to me. Again, I've read this story since I was a young child, at least once a year, because that's kind of the church I grew up in. You read all these stories every single year. I was taught this a lot. But this verse kind of never stood out before, and it said, he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. It's like, can you picture that? You know, like Jesus standing there and being like, this wasn't like I always just pictured like he got mad and turned over the tables and kind of made a mess and left. And that's not the case at all. He stayed. He like, this is not happening anymore. And I'm keeping it from keeping on happening. Like this, you've got to get this picture. This isn't a one time I'm mad at you, flip a table, leave. This is I have come here to show you a new way to do this. Keep it out. Keep it. Nope, not coming in today, guys. Sorry, we're not doing that here today. You know, and I think that's the other challenge for us, is it's got to be a thing of keeping it out. Okay? Because there's the familiarity where, well, I guess maybe just that table can be set up over there. Can you be a little quieter than before? You know, it's like keeping out the things to let the main thing be the main thing. And asking Jesus, help me do it, Jesus. Because I just want to tell you, Jesus was really good at what he did. He did it once. He didn't let anybody carry things through. So like letting that be our prayer, like, God, help me to be the house of your presence. Help me to keep out the things that aren't meant for this space between you and me. Help me to prioritize this place. And I think this is just how we're going to end. I'm going to pray it. Father, we ask that you, as your Holy Spirit, would be the helper that you promised that you'll be. Would you help to make our hearts your house of prayer? Would you show us what that looks like? Would you reveal yourself to us? We ask that you, as you are so good at doing, would not allow us to get those tables set back up, God, but that you would guard and protect our hearts from the evil one. That you'd guard and protect our hearts from distraction, that would be so unsatisfied with anything less than you, God. That we would experience your presence, that we would know you as life and breath, that we'd know you as living water and the bread of life, God, that we would eat and partake of you and that we would be satisfied, that we would walk in your ways, God, and experience all the blessings that you had promised, the same ways you had promised the Israelites. You have blessings and beautiful things promised for us in our life if we will hear your voice and walk in your ways. So, God, we ask that you would help us. Help us to walk in your ways, God. Would you be our shepherd and lead us to the table, God, that you've prepared for us? Would zealousness for your house consume us, God? Would you just give us that awe and wonder again, God, of what it means to be carriers of your presence? The fact that the living God dwells inside of us, the one who created everything that's so big that scientists can't even comprehend it, chooses to be inside of us and to be with us. Just ask that we would have that good fear of the Lord, God, that you would help us to tremble at your voice, tremble at your word, that we would honor it rightly, God. God, we thank you for your word. Thank you that you speak to us. I'm just going to ask that the prayer teams come up. And if you feel like this is also part of walking this out, I know I talked to this about like generational discipleship. And actually, I had a totally different thing that I had planned for today that I specifically had asked to be able to share on. And it was just like the Lord was like, yeah, this. But I think the concept's still the same of walking this out as community. Like, do you know, like it says, confess your sins to one another that you might be healed. And I think there's something too of like, what if we like all shared with one person this week, hey, this is a table I got going on in my life. Can you keep me accountable to it? Can you like text me every day and be like, did you get in his presence yet? Did you like, you know, like, can we encourage each other to be what God has called us to be? And the first thing he's called us to be is with him.